Now, This Week with Bob Mueller on News 2.
This week,
we're going to get every single thing you need.
President Biden lands at Fort Campbell as the Consoler-in-Chief tours tornado-ravaged Kentucky.
FEMA is designed for those uninsured and underinsured survivors.
Tornado-damaged victims in Tennessee are getting help as FEMA moves into the state bringing federal funds.
The pipeline this morning looks just as exciting as the pipeline as we entered 2021.
Despite the pandemic, 2021 has been one of the biggest years ever for new business investment in Tennessee.
So USAIT is a public-private partnership focusing on all sorts of crimes relating to illicit and illegal trade.
Smash and grab gangs are targeting high-end stores and terrorizing customers. A group here in Nashville is working to solve the problem.
This state would be better off if we had a competitive two-party system.
A new Vanderbilt poll shows deep polarization among Tennessee voters, but one area of agreement.
This is an issue that I've been working on for the last decade.
And Tennessee's senior Republican senator partners with a Democrat to try to keep children from being targeted by Instagram and other online platforms. Hello again and welcome to another edition of This Week. A new poll shows Tennessee voters deeply polarized. More in our This Week cover story. President Biden this week visited ravaged Kentucky by the tornadoes. But first, a look at the other political headlines of the week. Help is on the way for Tennesseans impacted by the devastating weekend tornadoes. Governor Bill Lee requested federal aid for 9 counties that experienced severe damage. News 2's Gerald Harris has more on applying for assistance.
President Joe Biden swiftly approved Tennessee's disaster declaration just 2 days after approving federal support to assist Kentucky's recovery efforts.
We know that this is the worst situation that has ever happened to these families.
Overnight tornadoes ripped through homes, separated families, and killed for miles from Illinois to Tennessee to Kentucky.
FEMA may not be first and foremost in their minds, but FEMA is but a tool in their recovery toolbox.
FEMA typically will provide assistance to the uninsured, underinsured, as well as public assistance funds to counties and municipalities for infrastructure repairs.
So we get boots on the ground with our disaster survivor assistance teams, and that is going door to door or providing registration information to survivors.
And the registration process for those seeking help is key, which can be done by calling FEMA, applying online, or downloading the FEMA app.
They will need their Social Security number. They will need a current phone contact number, the address where the damage occurred.
A mailing address and a bank routing number will also be requested. However, FEMA urges those with insurance to exhaust those efforts first.
Making sure that you reach out to your insurance company first to find out what they can provide you, because sometimes you're not completely insured for everything that may need to be replaced. So FEMA is designed for those uninsured and underinsured survivors.
2021 was an historic year for job creation and business in Tennessee. Economic and Community Development Commissioner Bob Mueller says the state secured once-in-a-generation investments. News 2's Gerald Harris tells us what's to come in 2022.
This year will be one for the records for our state.
It was a history-making year.
We'll end up the year in sending over 35,000 jobs. In a good year, to just level set, that would be a 20,000 job year, would be considered an exceptional year.
Thousands of jobs are coming to Tennessee, more than expected, with the unique investments of major corporations.
And when you look at what were the real job creators, the largest job creator was the Oracle announcement of 8,500 jobs, which will be over the next 8 to 10 years.
The other crown jewel for the state this year, a multi-billion-dollar Ford investment.
To $5.7 billion and about 5,800 to 6,000 jobs. That would rank number 2, and that's going to be over in West Tennessee.
But the 2022 jobs outlook could look different because of the size and scale of businesses moving to Tennessee.
The pipeline this morning looks just as exciting as the pipeline as we entered 2021. Having said that, Will we announce and recruit the same number of jobs in CapEx in 2022? No, sir, I don't think we will.
However, the commissioner expects significant impacts for workers and livable wages beginning with 2022 for places like Middle Tennessee.
I am as optimistic that we are going to have the most robust 2022 as far as opportunities for Tennesseans that are not only skilled jobs, but a pathway to a skilled job, and also the economics that will be, again, well beyond what I would deem family wage jobs.
Gerald Harris, News 2.
Before Congress this week, the head of Instagram was vague on creation of an app for children under the age of 12.
Will you commit to make the pause on Instagram Kids permanent? In other words, stop developing a site for an app for children under 13.
What I can commit to today is that no child between the ages of 10 and 12, should we ever manage to build Instagram for 10 to 12-year-olds, will have access to that without their explicit parental consent.
Not really answering the question, Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut and Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee have teamed up to protect young people from internet marketing.
This is an issue that I've been working on for the last decade. Indeed, the first online privacy bill that I brought forward was about 12 years. It was in 2012. And continuing to work on the issue of child online safety and privacy, online privacy for consumers, also data security and Section 230 reforms. Those are the areas that we have to touch, we have to improve, we have to put down the guardrails to make certain that industry knows that they can stay from here to here, but they can't go outside of that.
Now to our This Week cover story. A new Vanderbilt voter poll shows Tennesseans are polarized politically. Despite a vast political divide, Democrats and Republicans agree. They both want lawmakers working together. News 2's Gerald Harris has more.
People are feeling less united in Tennessee, according to researchers, specifically in how they view people of opposite political parties.
But yet there's still this strong desire among registered Tennesseans to for people to work together to solve problems.
And Tennesseans are showing their dissatisfaction with Governor Bill Lee's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and the recent COVID special session. His popularity dropped from 65% in May to 55%.
It is true that it's down, and I think it's probably down because of the special session. The special session put some laws in place that the public isn't particularly wild about. And so I think there's been some blowback.
But Democrats and Republicans do want common ground.
In general, right, there's a enthusiasm about the Tennessee state economy, much more so than the national economy.
67% of Republicans and 64% of Democrats see the economy as good. 60% of both parties support public redistricting hearings, and 80% of Democrats and Republicans want high-quality public education for Tennessee.
Is that there's a lot widespread agreement, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, or whether you have kids in the public schools or not. There's overwhelming support for more investment in public education.
With the political polarization in a state that's about 60% Republican, 40% Democratic, with a Republican supermajority, voters want competition, according to pollers.
This state would be better off if we had a competitive two-party system because it encourages greater accountability among politicians. And right now, it's very lopsided.
Gerald Harris, News 2.
Stay with us. This Week continues in a moment. Welcome back to This Week. President Joe Biden toured tornado-damaged Kentucky Wednesday. He came armed with compassion and hope and a singular message: help is here now, and help will be here until the recovery is done. The president began his tour of destruction in hard-hit Mayfield. The president saw the damage on the town square, to the courthouse and businesses. The president went into the crowd to shake hands, take some selfies, and reassure survivors federal dollars and resources will be there now and tomorrow. Later, the president talked about the spirit of community he witnessed.
I've been asking my FEMA folks and my Homeland Security, what what is the most impressive thing you've seen? I meant in terms, I started off thinking in damage. And they said the way you all come together, the way people just come out of nowhere to help as a community. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what America's supposed to be.
At one point during his tour of damage in Mayfield, the president held hands and bowed his head as his group said a prayer. After visiting Mayfield, President Biden traveled about an hour east to visit another community hit hard by the storms. News 2's Chelsea Beimfohr was at Fort Campbell, where President Biden landed on Marine One after leaving Dawson Springs.
President Biden's visit to Kentucky began here at Fort Campbell this morning. He then traveled on Marine One to both Mayfield and Dawson Springs, Kentucky, where he visited with those hardest hit by the storm.
Home after home, torn apart by 100-mile-per-hour winds in Kentucky. Businesses ravaged, people dead, and many still missing.
We're going to get every single thing you need. And I'm going to make sure the federal government does what's needed.
Today, President Joe Biden vowing to help after walking through neighborhoods in Dawson Springs and praying with those suffering physical and financial loss.
We're going to get this done. I promise you, the governor's not walking away, your county judge is not walking away, your congressman's not walking away, no one's walking away. We're in this for the long haul.
President Biden also noting the federal government has already sent dozens of generators and thousands of meals to Kentucky this week. But now they'll foot the bill for the next 30 days, paying for things like debris removal, temporary housing, and first responder overtime.
There's a lot of post-traumatic stress that comes from lying in your house and all of a sudden the roof goes blowing off and you wonder whether your kids are around. I really mean it. You know, where the shock of losing a home and a business, the grief of losing someone, it's happening right before the holidays, as I said, and we're going to make sure that you have all the help you need, including the kind of mental help that's needed to help people through difficult times.
After spending hours on the ground today surveying that horrific damage, President Biden boarded Air Force One and headed home, leaving folks in Kentucky with a glimmer of hope for the weeks to come.
President Biden is back in Washington, D.C. tonight, but federal resources are now on their way here to Kentucky. Reporting at Fort Campbell, Chelsea Beimfohr, News 2.
Stay with us. This week continues in a moment. Welcome back to This Week. I am pleased to be joined by Matt Albins. He is USAIT spokesperson and former acting director of U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement. Welcome, Matt. Really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me, Bob.
We've seen the videos of these groups, and it's just frightening. These smash and grab robberies of high-end stores, dozens swarming the store, steal thousands of dollars worth of merchandise in a matter of seconds. Shoppers are anxious, retailers are losing money, and USAIT is working on this issue, including here in Tennessee. Explain what you're doing.
So USAIT is a public-private partnership focusing on all sorts of crimes relating to illicit and illegal trade. So whether it's counterfeited goods, pirated goods, or in this case, goods that are being stolen in mass numbers, and then obviously there need to be fenced some way, right? In the old days, they were fenced on the street. Now you have e-commerce, you have TikTok and Snapchat and places like that where people can go and sell these various items that they obtained unlawfully. And it creates a really, lack of a better term, black market that encourages these types of crimes to occur because there is so much money to be made in these types of offenses. And in some of these locations where there is not a lot of criminal justice repercussions for these types of offenses, it's encouraging individuals to continue to commit them.
How big of a problem is it? This is more than shoplifting or even running in a store, grabbing something and running out. This seems very coordinated, targeting high-end companies with a lot of people involved, making it very difficult for security.
Well, I don't think it's any different than what you see in other areas of illegal trade. These are transnational organized crime rings that are facilitating and perpetrating these criminal activities, whether it's narcotics, whether it's counterfeit goods, whether it's human beings. These transnational criminal organizations are involved and they have their finger in everything. And they are making billions of dollars a year off of these various crimes. And that's one of the challenges that we're trying to overcome in the USAIT initiative is educating both the consumer as well as industry with regard to it's not a victimless crime. It's not just some guy on the street selling a fake Rolex for $100 as opposed to $15,000. Those dollars go directly to these criminal organizations, these cartels. We know we've traced money before to terrorist organizations, to organizations that are involved in weapons trafficking and human trafficking. So all of these things are interrelated. These transnational criminal organizations get their fingers in everything. And this is just another manifestation of that.
So some of this merchandise, this stolen merchandise, is being sold on the internet to unsuspecting customers here who believe they found a deal when they're buying stolen merchandise. That's
correct. And unfortunately, it encourages more of that behavior. And what we try to encourage the consumer to do is, think about what you're actually buying. And if it is too good to be true, if the price is unrealistic for the item that you're looking to purchase, one, you're either getting a counterfeit, in which case you're not getting what you're paying for, or two, you're buying a stolen item that somebody has lost significant amounts of money on, and now you're just facilitating the furtherance of that crime. How much does counterfeit material, counterfeit merchandise factor into this? Do they use the real stuff and flash that and then sell counterfeit materials? I mean, counterfeiting is I would say is certainly much more predominant. Obviously, the smash and grabs have gotten a lot of attention because they're so public and they're so violent in some of the ways that they're being carried out. But the counterfeiting problem is massive. In 2019, if you look at numbers, it cost estimated $131 billion to the U.S. economy, 325,000 jobs. And not only is that revenue that's taken from legitimate businesses that should be going into the U.S. financial system, those are dollars that are destined for infrastructure within these communities and the tax revenue. So you're talking schools, you're talking healthcare. I think everybody could agree we could certainly use more investments in healthcare during what we're facing right now. Roads, all those various things that tax revenue goes to fund, that money is lost because it's going to criminal organizations. Is this a trend? Is this a fad, or is this something that maybe we're going to see more of? We're seeing these obviously organized groups, and they're pretty detailed in what they do, and they know their targets beforehand. Well, the counterfeiting and the illegal markets are continuing to grow. It's not something that's going to be a flash in the pan. This is something that's here to stay, and that's why we're working so closely in this public-private partnership, trying to get law enforcement, trying to get policymakers and lawmakers to understand the real impacts of illegal trade and what it does to public safety, to national security, and just general quality of life issues with regard to infrastructure within the country. And so sharing information both within the commercial community as well as within law enforcement, and then again trying to get some policy changes that can help implement and impact some of the loopholes and weaknesses and vulnerabilities in the system that allow this to happen. And then, for the regular consumer, it's a matter of being diligent when you're buying things online. I'll throw a bone to my old agency, ICE, and they have a really good website up there on their Intellectual Property Rights Center with regard to holiday shopping and how to protect yourself. But it's just a lot of it is just basic, right? I mean, pay attention to the detail of what you're looking at. Are the words spelled properly? What is the address? What's the phone number? All those various things that legitimate companies would have that are generally not present in the counterfeit merchandise. And one thing I would also add, most of this counterfeit merchandise, again, is coming from overseas, coming from Asia, although it's starting to expand into other parts of the world. But a lot of that is created and produced by both child labor and individuals that are forced into labor via labor trafficking. So not only are the dollars that are being made by these criminal organizations going back to facilitate further criminality, the individuals that are being victimized just to produce this on behalf of these criminal enterprises, are individuals that we should be trying to protect, and that's what we're trying to do. Finally, I would assume this is a multi-million, if not billion-dollar illegal industry that's going to be difficult to stop because it is so profitable. How hard is it for organizations like you to infiltrate this and get this stopped, or are we just going to see it continuing? Well, I think when you look at what law enforcement has done, they've really gotten better at going after these. Again, through the Intellectual Property Rights Center, there's 27 different entities within the federal government that are all there working side by side, sharing information, sharing intelligence, working cases jointly. Customs and Border Protection has made significant investments into trying to identify these counterfeit goods on the front end. A lot of investments have been made into the e-commerce into these small parcel facilities, right? The DHLs, the FedExes, U.S. Postal Service. Now you've got all these places that are sending things in small packages with, hundreds of millions of packages a year that they need to try to identify which ones might contain counterfeit goods. So it's crucial that there's intelligence sharing, cooperation between industry and law enforcement, support and resources for agencies that prosecute that, whether it's on a local level or at the federal level within the U.S. attorney's offices. All these things work together to help stave off some of the impacts of the illegal trade. But again, this is not a problem that you can ultimately arrest your way out of. There's going to be some real policy and legislative changes that need to be brought about in order to close some of these vulnerabilities and loopholes that help allow this criminal activity to flourish.
Matt Albins, USAIT, really appreciate your time and your insight. Have a great holiday, sir.
Thank you, Bob. You too.
Stay with us. This Week continues in a moment. Thanks for spending part of your weekend with us. I want to thank my guest, Matt Albins. We hope to see you back here next weekend for another edition of This Week. Until then, you have a great week.